Welcome to the show, Huss.
Thanks for having me, Tom. Excited to be here.
Mate, good to have you, and I'm very excited to be talking about basically how can people really create, that perfect plan to find peak performance. And obviously, with your background, as I've said in the introduction, you've applied yourself, by the sounds of it, in a lot of different facets in fitness, and especially in the physique competitions as well. So it sounds like you've applied a lot of these principles, and obviously that your amazing handbook there, where you're talking to a lot of those habits that you can create to sustain your peak performance and your potential. There's just a lot in there. So I'm keen today to really kind of we'll try and unpack some of the really important information and concepts that you've put together in your book. But before we get into that, I think a really great question to start for someone like yourself that's across the industry and has been involved in so many different facets up to now. What is peak performance? What is it? And really, how does it interact with the concept of well-being? Because there's obviously a lot of talk at the moment, and has been for a little while, around well-being. I like changing the conversation into performance. So, what is peak performance in your view?
Yeah, great question, and thank you for the intro and reading the book and making the effort for it. Peak performance, essentially, the way I've really condensed that into the book, is around reaching and sustaining your potential, right? And that's really subjective to each and every individual. I think it's relevant to each and every individual based on where they are today and where they want to go, right? Where well-being comes in from my perspective, and you would have recognized it in the book, is the foundational holistic element of well-being, right? Our well-being, our health is the foundation to what we can achieve in wherever we choose to put our attention and energy. So that's the way I see it. I'm a bit more aligned with you, right? It's about performance. And when we talk performance, more than just physical, but holistic performance. And I think, a good analogy might be like a car, right? Performing our best takes a whole bunch of things more than just the car engine, obviously the fuel, obviously different elements of that, right? And so human beings, we're quite holistic, interconnected. There's many elements that exist within us. I think we're still finding out a lot around that. And often we can be quite tunnel vision when it comes to performance, and I recognise that there's so much more, and we're learning more, right? So yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, that's a good point. There's more to learn on this, and there's lots of new research into how individuals can get themselves performing from a physiological level as well. You've probably, in recent times, we've probably heard a lot more around things like cold therapy, cold showers, breath work. All of these cool and interesting things are coming out. So it's an evolving space. But effectively, your passion is around, it sounds like it's how to really get the best out of yourselves, and I guess in a workplace environment as well. It's that idea of a high-performing team, and that's been quite challenging in the last couple of years.
Absolutely, and that's the pinnacle, right? And the element really there is high-performing teams are essentially a whole bunch of high-performing individuals, right? And so we've got to bring it back to the individual, and that's it. And you hit it on the head, right? You mentioned two fantastic things there for performance: cold therapy and breathing, for example. And they're actually, funny enough, two of the things in the last couple of years since I've written the book that I've become really involved with. So they're definitely relevant elements that really help inspire that performance. But yeah, no doubt, really performance is really holistic. It's unique to the individual, and there's many facets to it. And that's what led to writing the book, creating these workshops, and helping individuals. It's because it's really unique to everyone, and it's got to be available to everyone. If we don't, my background's in health and performance coaching. If we don't make it relevant or guided by activities that help individuals recognize where they are and where they want to be, it's really difficult to get clarity on what's that next behavior, what's that next step, what's that next action that's going to help an individual become better. And if we don't have clarity, it's all too ambiguous and all too difficult. And the more we stick in that climate, unfortunately, the last few years, it's been difficult in many other ways. The stress is too much, and the individuals just aren't going anywhere near where they can be from a performance perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. And Huss, I just want to share a funny story from yesterday. I was at work with Josh, who you know, because we, him
Yeah.
as a colleague. Yeah, so I drove into work and I was like, mate, we're going to go to the bay today and have a quick plunge in the Port Phillip Bay at Port Melbourne. And if you don't know where that is, it's about 10 degrees in the water at this time of year in winter. So we drove down there at a lunch break and had a go in the had a quick dip in the water, got the brain freeze. But gee, I felt good afterwards. Hit the hot showers afterwards, and then I was good as gold. It was like almost having about 3 coffee, the equivalent of having 3 coffees. And I found that extra gear in the afternoon, which is kind of a rarity. So yeah, it's quite a funny. It was quite a funny one because we were just absolutely freezing afterwards as well. And very spontaneous as well.
Yeah, love it. And I mean, you've highlighted a wonderful way, and I mean, I can picture you and Josh doing that. I've been great. Give me a call next time. But the great thing about jumping into the water, there's a great crew that I actually do it with, usually on a weekly basis, called Cold Dips in Elwood there. So the great thing about jumping in the water from a neurotransmitter perspective is that it really stimulates the focus one, right? Neuroreferent, I believe it's called. So there's relevance there, and that's a great behavior action that can drive that focus. So yeah, but doing that at lunch would have really helped. So yeah,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was a very spontaneous thing to try on a Thursday, but it was great, mate. I've gone on a tangent around cold therapy there. Let's bring it back. Hey, mate, with your just getting into this space, you've done a lot in this space. Why have you become so interested in the realm of performance? And tell us a little bit about your background as a competitor as well with those national physique competitions.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I never grew up looking at an occupation or something. Yeah, I want to do that. But what did thematically become kind of really I started recognizing was I was really interested in high performance. Right? At the time, I didn't know it to be called that, but just recognizing people at the top of their field, high performing athletes. How do people really express the best version of themselves? And so for me, everything from watching tennis to actors to people who are just really making real impact and change, it resonated with me. So I looked at that. I was highly influenced at 15, 16 by my uncles who were all into bodybuilding and training. And so that became my training ground. And naturally went into the gym, started really complementing my sporting efforts. I played a lot of tennis and footy. And I enjoyed the element of being able to kind of train and develop and become more due to effort. And so for me, it was a physical thing. And then I really started to recognize that really action follows thought and mindset and behavior. And so I really got into the literature around high performance, and it just grew from there until where we are kind of today. So for me, I've recognized these thematic elements around holistic health, around understanding yourself, what you want to do, what we can do daily to achieve those outcomes that we're looking forward to. And so, yeah, it's probably been the slow linear trajectory over time, and then really come to the recent points of putting the book together because it made most sense for me. And I'm an essentialist personality type. For me, things have to sit in some kind of chronological order to make most sense. After reading the book, you might recognize that. So.
There's a very well ordered book. I don't know what the opposite of that is, but I'm probably the more chaotic version of that. So I appreciate and need people like you to structure things up. But no, it's a really obviously well structured thoughts that you've pulled together there. There's a lot of lessons to be taken out of bodybuilding, isn't it? In terms of obviously the physical element is there, but there's such a mental and focus to it as well. What did you learn from all those years of training in that form, like from a mental clarity perspective and just performance as well?
Yeah, I mean, great question. Competed twice, national level. Really got the best out of myself. The thing is, if we look at it from a pillar and action perspective, it's everything from nutrition, mindset, determination, discipline, routine, and consistent behaviors ongoingly. And that's what really resonated with me. The biggest thing I learned was really being able to, and really the book's modeled in that way, right? Understanding why I'm doing it, why I want to become the best version of myself in that field, and why I enjoyed it. What routines and elements, for example, nutrition, the actual physical part, the mindset part, how can I be present in every single rep and execution to make the most out of it? Then how can I refine it and go and lean on people or literature with reference experience to then ensure that I'm actually stepping towards and working at a higher level to achieve the results. So probably put a fair bit in there, but I hope what that comment illuminates is that there are a lot of variables. What I will say for me is that the consistency for me become the most important thing for the results, because consistently enacting habits over time is what builds, I guess, that iceberg effect, right? Where towards the end of that effort, there are outcomes based on that. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. That the discipline's quite critical in the bodybuilding world, but there's so many applications in many other facets of life as well. What are the keys to creating peak performance from your perspective? Like, there's obviously a lot in it. What do you think are the real key parts to it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably lean on the book a little bit, but I think the key element of actualizing your potential and sustaining, it's got to be sustainable for you. And it really starts to mean three key ways. We have to look internally, understand who we are, self-awareness, why we're doing what we're doing, really resonate with the purpose of our choice, the decision we're making, and who we are and the impact we want to have. I think the second element is around ritualizing actions that really align to the outcomes that we're trying to drive towards. So once we have clarity, what really matters, what are our goals, what are the actions every day that we're going to become better at and deliberately practice to become our best? And to me, the third element for continual long-term success is it's got to be sustainable. How do we refine what we're doing to attract the goals that we're going for? And so real that accountability, that repetition, while making it quite fun so we can get into a state of flow and be our best long-term.
Yeah, perfect. And I guess those three elements there, you can't really go straight into action, or you can, but you don't. Then I guess you don't. It doesn't really result in that sustained refining sort of stage. You never get to that point where you're really tweaking it and being consistent. So it sounds like you can't really skip the first step. Maybe we should just sort of delve into that first part a little bit there. So you called that finding you in your book. What are the important parts to? Why is it important to start there? And what are those components that you've highlighted there in the finding you part of the book?
Yeah, the reason why I started there, I think it's really important to, one, look internally to understand oneself, values, goals. We're all different personality types, and to really align with what's important for us, right? And so I often find that there's a lot of great things to go and do, but how do we validate what's right for us? And so in the world, in an information age with an unlimited amount of things we can do for performance or for whatever we want to achieve, I actually feel like the modern world in that way, the potential risk is that we're actually got so much choice we don't know what to do. So the finding you element is to really break down what are my key values, what's important to me, what am I striving for? Because what that does is it really allows you to focus on what's important. Start building self-awareness. You start to think of life and activating any area you want to grow in an element of what aligns with me and what doesn't. And it's okay because once we learn to say no to a whole bunch of things that aren't you, you recognize that there's a great amount of presence and availability to be focused on what does matter. So for me, maybe illuminate the finding you element a bit more. It's really about being remarkably authentic, right? If we look at anyone in any element of life who's a high performer, they are expressing the best version of themselves, right? They know who they are. They know their strengths and weaknesses. They know their life values, what their purpose is. And these are all topics through the book, you'd know. And the handbook actually goes through ways and questions and different type of activities to help you find yours that I found really useful for mine, because I struggled a lot with that until I found different ways. And so, yeah, the idea there is to be really strong in your foundation. And so when you go to the outside world, you're not actually lured by shiny objects. You're actually driven by who you are. You know, there's that self-assurance, self-confidence, and that self-esteem, and you know the path you're on. And I think for a lot of people, they'll really benefit. And in working with a lot of people, they do benefit in thinking in this way.
Yeah, you're right about having lots of information and choices in the amount of info that gets thrown our way. And I guess for maybe when that's going wrong for people, or they don't have their their values and they haven't thought about that first step. It kind of, you see those types of people where they're from a physical aspect, maybe they're trying to change the way that they eat, or their shiny object sort of syndrome with, I'm going to do intermittent fasting and give that a try. It's kind of like, they're missing that, I guess, that internal compass to come back to go, well, what are my goals, but what do I value as a first step? Is that one of the areas where you see when you're coaching people, that kind of thing? Is that where people go wrong? Is it just that lacking of real understanding of who they are?
Yeah, I mean, great point. I think that what it does is, I think a lot of the time people kind of don't consider it, unaware of it. They're not cognizant of the value of that. And so when they take the time to, so I work with a lot of corporate teams as well. And so when we do that and we align our personal values with organizational values, or we align our purpose with the organizational purpose, and we get really concrete about why we do what we do every day for our work, for our health, and how it aligns to the organization or our purpose. And then what I find is there's more congruency in regards to who we are, our values, our actions. Then all of a sudden, our everyday actions, those everyday things that we do become so clearer when in contribution to our wider goal and effort. And that's the power bit, right? People become just a bit more aware, conscious, whereas previously wouldn't have thought about it in that way. And that's powerful because our thoughts lead our actions into very powerful outcomes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's that thing as well, is like that idea of what you consume, you become. So like if you're constantly consuming, for example, the intermittent fasting, on that topic there, like if that's all you're consuming on your social media is all the different ways you can eat food, but and or try these different diets and things, it kind of leads to a confused feeling. So then you start to become that confused person with that approach to your nutrition, for example. So Huss, with that then, so where can people start, or what are some practical tips in finding their values? Because for some people that's quite that's a big question, and it often leads to a feeling of like, far out, where do I start there? So do you have any tips on, or tools or questions that you might ask those types of people?
Yeah, absolutely. The handbook goes through it, Plans to Peak Perform. It's on Amazon, but I can go deeply into it. And typically, I like using the language around aligning with your values. We all have them, right? We have to align, find them. The questions there around there, what's most important to you, right? People lean on towards security, financial freedom, relationships, vitality, right? Health, well-being is health. So when we think about this, we do a top priority list, for example. Typically, I'd start with something as simple as that, or make a priority list in regards to most important to you to least. And then when we think of that, look at that, then think of our actions. Are we actually representing our highest priorities, or what we say they are? Because the opportunity there is to really align with what we're saying, or are we really thinking? Are we just saying it, or are we really actually living by it? And then when you do that kind of accountability assessment, I really encourage individuals, just as a tip, have your top 5, and next to the top 5, write what you do every day for it. If you're not currently actioning each and one of your values in a practical daily action, they're probably not in your top 5, right? Or you're unaware in regards to yourself not actioning them. The great thing here is we're all on the mission of becoming more aware. So maybe what you once thought isn't a reality, and that's fantastic because you're finding yourself a bit more as well, right? That's typically it. I mean, let's reverse it back to your great comment around intermittent fasting. Great tool, great ritualized action around nutrition, brain performance, and overall energy if done correctly. But the step before that is why. What's your goal, right? If we understand the why, which we're talking about, values, purpose, our goals, then we can look at the different toolbox options, like the fasting, for example, it's specific training, what works best for you based on the goals and what you want to achieve, right?
I love that exercise. You mentioned just the top five values, and then your actions that go with that. Is that, just out of interest, is that something that you would, in your world and your day, so you start your day, was that something as a daily thing that you would look at, or is that something that's for you in particular, being a high performer yourself and being able to write and being able to talk about it so well? Is that something that you practice every day, or is it more of a occasional thing for you?
Yeah, the way I do it personally, and I'm always evolving it to help get the best out of me. My goal and mission every day is to make my best impact in the work that I do and be totally focused in it. So my morning process or morning routine is that, yes, part of my morning routine, a bit of gratefulness practice, some mindfulness, and I do go over my top 5 values, and I align next to each one what I'm doing today to actualize and embody them. Because when we action our values and what's important to us, we identify with them. It's when we behavior them that it becomes part of our identity. So for me, every day, our choices are a chance to identify who we are, right? And anyone can choose any value. And so to answer your question, yes, part of my morning process is going over my 5, which is vitality, self-development, relationships, financial freedom, and leaving a legacy in what I do and the impact of my work. And I align to each and think, what am I doing today? Each and every action. The power in that is I recognize that what can offer me the mundane things become this powerful contribution to my whole life's purpose. And when we think of our opportunity each day like that, in the work that we do, in what we're contributing towards, there's this energy in that we're missing out on if we're not aligning. And I think it all comes back to being cognizant and present in why we do what we do.
Yeah, wow. Well, that's fantastic. I feel like a lot of people, including myself, probably aren't as, I don't think would be sounding as disciplined and as articulate in the way that you've put that together there. That's great that you're able to practice that every day. For people that are, I'm going to say, mere mortals, where do they go wrong in this process? Let's say they get into this and they have a go at, listing their values. Where do they fall off, if there is a point in time where they do?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's different, right? Everyone's got their thing. I encourage individuals to build self-awareness, because when we understand ourselves better, I don't think there's a one answer for that. Typically, I can comment on what I've seen a lot of. I think people get motivated by an idea, but motivation quickly goes away. It's habit that keeps it sticking. So
Good
what I
point.
do encourage, most people, I think, motivated, they want to see results. And so if you don't see the result, it kind of dribbles away. That's what I see. But typically, again, goes back to, if you just do one thing, right? There's a powerful element in every day just doing one thing towards your goal, right? We've got the idea of flow, for example, where your skill and current climate meets the challenge, right? To go straight into a morning routine practice after having none, it's not going to work. It's not going to stick. It's too difficult. It's just too much, and it's overwhelming. But what you can do right now is write down your highest value, right? And then for a minute, spend a minute thinking, is this truly my highest value? How do I show that? And how do I turn up for it every day? So I always encourage, what's the one thing you can do? Just that one little thing towards your goal today. And you recognize in life, there really aren't too many goals or things that you're aspiring towards, but there is that clear one thing you can do next. And so all I'd say is, and there's no one way, right? I'm very mindful of actually sharing my way, because I don't believe it's the way for everyone. It's the way I find works for me. I'm a regimented person. For a lot of personality types, I actually laugh internally. My partner's the opposite of me, right? It's the last thing, that type of regimented life removes that freedom, which is her highest value, right? And so she has to create a lifestyle which allows her to feel free. And that's why just the one thing works for everyone, I think.
That is just some really sage advice, mate. And I thank you so much for that. That's fantastic and really nice to sort of unpack the finding you element of creating peak performance. So, Huss, thanks so much for your time today, and look forward to chatting on the next episode.
Awesome. Look forward to it.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks for having me.